All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Meds channel. It's Maddie here, and today we're going to be talking about the best decks to play in Pokemon Pocket right now from a competitive metagame perspective. Paldean Wonders has been out for a couple of weeks, or not even a couple of weeks. It's been like a week and a half. I'm not even exactly sure, but we're going into the second tournament weekend. We have a massive tournament this weekend, so even though we don't have any ranked battles, I definitely want to talk about what I think is going on in the metagame right now and which decks I think are kind of vying for the top, viability. Vying for viability, I suppose, is what we're saying. But anyway, before we get into the best decks to play right now, what you guys got to do is go and register and prepare to play in the tournament this weekend. That's right, guys, the PGL 30th anniversary tournament, $1,500 cash prize pool, plus they're raffling off 30 Full Art Professors research cards to everybody participating. This tournament is going to be tomorrow. That is March 7th at 10 a.m. Eastern time. We're going to be live streaming the entire tournament here on the Pocket Meds channel. It's going to be a ton of fun, but definitely go and register. This is going to be one of the biggest tournaments we've had in a very long time, and I really want everybody to participate. Crazy prize pool. I'm very excited about this, but okay. Anyway, let's get into it. So not only are we going to cover the decks in today's video, because I think we have like 8 different decks in today's video to talk about, but I'm also going to talk about like how they interact with each other, which decks are on the rise, which are on the fall. You can use the timestamps down in the description below if you want to navigate throughout this video, but also keep in mind these decks aren't in any order, right? Just because a deck is at the end of the video or the beginning doesn't mean it's the best. There's a lot of nuance here. The metagame has changed completely with Paldean Wonders. It's been very refreshing to see a bunch of new cards and new deck lists, but even since the cards released, a lot of things are changing, and there's a lot of really interesting trends going on. So that's what we're going to touch on in today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. Let's dive into it. The first deck list today is going to be what we're calling like Magbolt or Belly Mag. So Bellibolt, definitely one of the best new cards, the best new Pokemon to come out in Paldean Wonders, and a lot of people have been trying to figure out the best way to play it. I've really settled on like 2 distinct variants of Bellibolt, and this is going to be the first one. And the thing is, this isn't really a Bellibolt deck list. This is literally Oricorio Magnezone, but with a 1/1 Tadbulb Bellibolt lineup thrown in. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, okay, so is this that much different? I mean, it's traditional Magnezone Oricorio, and Magnezone Oricorio has been very good this season because of the less and less amount of Hydreigon that we've seen this season. So Magnezone Oricorio in general is extremely strong, but I do believe that if you throw one Bellibolt into the deck list, it makes it a lot better in general. It just gives you an option, right? Theoretically speaking, if Oricorio is really relevant in the matchup, then we can kind of just use Magnezones as like an energy battery on the bench to then maybe go into our Bellibolt at the end of the match while Oricorio puts in a ton of work. And if Oricorio isn't super relevant in the matchup, although most of the time this season it will be, we can just go like with Magnezone, because Magnezone is a very effective attacker. So this is a deck list that is very, very just kind of like mixed with a ton of different strategies. You have Mirror Shot, you have Thunder Blast, you have Oricorio's Zap Attack, and you have High Voltage Cannon. So it can do so many different things, and I think that's the biggest upside to this deck. Although it is playing a lot of Pokemon, we have Clement in the deck. We also have Lycia and Copycat, which is going to be really nice, right? Because Magnemite and Tadbulb are 50 HP, so that Lycia allows you to pull those basic Pokemon out of your deck list. We're also playing Training Arena, which is our Training Area. I always call it Training Arena, but it's Training Area. And this is mostly just to buff Bellibolt's damage. We're always seeing Training Area with Bellibolt because it brings that attack up to 150 damage, which is very relevant just in a lot of different scenarios. So I really love this deck. I put it at the first deck in the video today because I really think that this is probably one of your best bets, whether you're going to be playing in ranked or if you're going to be playing in tournaments this weekend, namely the $1,500 tournament. I think that Magnezone Oricorio with Bellibolt is kind of the best all-around deck list. Now, because they have so many different things going on in this deck, it can be a little bit inconsistent, but it's also not the fastest deck in the world. Like, we're not playing Zeraora, we're not playing Elemental Switch or X Speed, so it's not really about like utilizing Bellibolt early in the game. Sometimes you can get it off, sometimes you can't. But also, if you lead Tadbulb going second, you can always just charge and then attack with Bellibolt on like turn 2. So it has some really fast-paced potential, but really this is like a turn 3, turn 4 deck. It likes to settle in, get its board state all set up, and then, kind of whittle down your opponent and be kind of technical while utilizing Oricorio. And it's, again, just very traditional. I think anybody that's played Magnezone Oricorio over the last couple of months is pretty familiar with this strategy. Now you can just also throw in a Bellibolt and deal 140. Technically, it's 150 with Training Area, which is pretty cool. So, yeah, lots of different ways that people are playing Bellibolt, but right now, I kind of feel the most comfortable about this mainly because how strong Oricorio is. I think if we take a look at the average win rates across all of the decks in today's video, this is going to have the highest average win rate. It's, I believe, won a couple of tournaments here or there. This isn't the only Bellibolt deck. If you wanted to play a deck that was solely just all about Bellibolt in general, we'll cover that here later in the video. But this, to me, we had to cover it, and I'm going to cover it first because I think that this is probably, like, I don't know, like, it's hard to explain it, but I just feel like this deck has everything it needs. It's just sometimes, you know, other decks get lucky or whatnot, but this deck could beat almost anything. Oricorio specifically, we have to talk about, because without Hydreigon, the Suicune decks do not love Oricorio. Altaria traditionally loses to Oricorio unless they are playing Gourgiest, and yeah, I mean, that's enough of a reason to play it right there, you know what I mean? So also, I mean, Bellibolt can't attack Oricorio, so it's extremely relevant. This is a very, very good deck. Even though it's not the fastest deck in the world, it's just got so many options, which is really strong. Next up, we're going to talk about Hydreigon, because I think Hydreigon is still, you know, a top 5, top 6, 7, 8 deck in the game. I think that a lot of people have moved off Hydreigon for somewhat good reason. The two most popular decks this season being Suicune Baxcalibur with Qianpao and Greninja Altaria. Those are two decks that actually beat Hydreigon pretty significantly. However, there are some other meta progressions going on at the top of the metagame, at the very forefront, that I think has really opened up the wave here for Hydreigon to be even more, you know, to be more relevant than it was early this season. And quite frankly, this is still a very, very strong deck list. Hydreigon kind of beats everything other than those two most played decks. And I think that that's a big reason why I still consider Hydreigon to be a very strong deck list. But you got to keep in mind that Suicune Baxcalibur Qianpao deck has been struggling a ton recently. Lots of Bellibolt decks running around, lots of Magnezone decks running around, and even some of the Altaria decks are actually doing well into the Qianpao. So it's a very interesting scenario. I think that, you know, maybe this weekend and throughout the rest of the season, the Baxcalibur Qianpao deck, which we'll cover later in this video, is probably going to continue to be the most played deck. But if it ever falls, like if that deck list ever really does sort of come out of the limelight, I think Hydreigon's going to be a phenomenal choice. You're going to consistently do well into all of the electric decks, and you still have an opportunity to beat Altaria and Suicune and Baxcalibur. It's just they aren't great matchups. In general, I think Hydreigon has actually become underrated, which is kind of hilarious because I think that a big part of the season is people were just sort of sick of Hydreigon. And of course, the two most popular decks just happen to be strong into Hydreigon. So there's a lot of reasons why it hasn't seen a ton of play. I think it's floating around a 51.5% win rate so far this season. But honestly, I think that as time goes on, the metagame will actually become a little bit more well-positioned for Hydreigon and Absol. So it's still a top tier deck, still a very, very strong deck. This is not something I would ever want to see in a tournament or on the ranked ladder. And again, it is high roll, it is RNG. We are playing ice pops and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, guys, I think that Hydreigon, it deserves more respect than it has been getting, at least this season. Again, I think it's sort of a rubber band effect. I think some people are just sort of sick of it, which is totally fine. But if you wanted to play Hydreigon, if you're just an absolute lover of this deck list, then yeah, I mean, I think that it's a totally fine option right now. Last week, I don't know if I really would have recommended it, but honestly, like as we go into the third week, I think it actually has the potential to rise back up even more and really kind of it's probably going to settle down in that top 5 spot, along with like Magnezone or Oricorio, Qianpao, Altaria, and maybe just sort of Turbo Bellibolt. It's definitely right there. It does beat all of the lightning type decks, which I think is a really big advantage. But we'll see how, like, what amounts of decks people play this weekend. Particularly, I'm very curious with it being a very competitive tournament. $1,500 in the prize pool. People want to win. So the metadata sort of, I guess, collection of what decks people are playing this weekend is going to be a really great reflection of understanding what's going on in the metagame. And that's going to help us sort of prepare into the upcoming week once ranked comes out. So I'm really curious. I really am. But I had to talk about Hydreigon because it's still worth mentioning, quite frankly. It's crazy that it went from being by far like the most toxic, annoying thing in the entire game to being kind of underrated, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Next up is going to be Altaria and Gourgiest. We have two different Altaria decks in here. I think that Altaria, as long as you play it with Chingling, is still very good. You're going to have a decent shot into Turbo Bellibolt because they play a lot of tool cards. You're going to do pretty decent, honestly, into Suicune Baxcalibur because they play rare candy, and you're also going to do fairly well into Hydreigon. I think Chingling is, honestly, probably still the MVP of the game right now, especially this season. Hydreigon does play like the Poison Barb Nihilego stuff, which can make Chingling more annoying, but there's less Hydreigon, more Suicune, more Bellibolt. Just it's a really, really, really good card. I would recommend everybody play Chingling because honestly, Chingling is just strong into everything that people play right now. other than Altaria, which is kind of funny. So this Altaria deck is the version I would play if we are not playing Greninja High Roll Altaria, which again, we will cover later in this video. But this is the one with Gourgiest. This deck list hasn't really changed around at all. We're playing like aggro Gourgiest with Training Arena, so that's a really nice buff. Makes Altaria it allows Altaria to deal 140 damage and Gourgeist to deal 80 damage plus the the Chingling Ping damage early in the game. It really kind of it ends up being more than you would think. Plus Rocky Helmet, just a really strong deck, quite frankly. And the thing about this deck list and why I think it'll remain very relevant is because it's by far the best way to play Chingling Altaria while not having to worry about like the auto lose matchup into Oricorio. So again, if you're not playing the Greninja version, which by the way, the Greninja version also just loses to Oricorio, this is the kind of only way people are playing Altaria right now that doesn't lose to Oricorio, which is relevant because I think that Magnezone Oricorio deck we covered earlier is kind of like the best overall deck to play right now. So this is a very underrated deck list. I'm not gonna lie. I know a lot of people play the Greninja version, but trust me, like you're not gonna want to just lose hard to the Oricorio matchup, and you're still gonna want to have a good shot into every deck in the game. I think right now, this is the best like overall deck list. Like, I don't know how else to really explain it. We're not playing Oricorio. We're not playing Rare Candy. It's just super consistent. It can kind of win against anything in the entire game. This to me is like the most just sort of consistent, like middle of the road. We're not counterplaying anything. We're just playing a consistent, strong deck list. This is kind of the best option for you right now. And I know it's not super flashy is the funny thing about this deck. There's nothing like super crazy or like technical about it. It's just standard Altaria, Chingling, and Gourgeist, but it really is consistent. It flows quite well. Just in general, a really strong deck. So I gotta recommend it. We're still playing Lissy in here. Double Chingling, double Swablu. So one Lissy, one Pokeball. Makes the deck a lot more consistent. Double Research, one Copycat, and we still have Sabrina, Cyrus, and Mars in the deck list. I love this. I really do. I think that this is gonna be a strong option for a very, very long time. Like the only reason you wouldn't play Gourgeist is if Oricorio was not seeing any play. But as we know, right now, Oricorio is very relevant this season, which is a good thing. I think whenever Oricorio is relevant in the metagame, that it means that the meta is going to be healthy. So I personally don't mind a lot of Oricorio, but again, this is sort of the deck you play if you wanted to play Altaria. I still think Altaria, honestly, is potentially the best Pokemon in the game. It's just really good, super consistent. 130 damage, 190 HP, double energies. You have access to Chingling, you have Sleep Swablu, you have Training Arena, you have Rocky Helmets, you have Lissy to grab Swablu. It really is just sort of the best package in the entire game. That's how I feel. The thing about Altaria is you have to play it in a Psychic Energy deck, which does limit it a little bit, but Chingling, Swablu, Lyssia is so good. It really is. So again, a deck we're all familiar with, but something I really would recommend right now. The next deck list is probably going to surprise a couple of people. This is like a bit of a throwback. This is actually going to be Dark Greninja. And Dark Greninja is a very, very interesting deck right now. It's kind of popped up over the last 3 or 4 days. Just a really, really relevant, matchup spread in the game right now. Because we're playing Greninja and we're playing Chingling, it really makes our deck sort of counter to a lot of other decks in the game, which is always extremely relevant. This deck has been doing really well into Suicune and Qianpao, which is pretty cool. And at the end of the day, I think that Darkrai plus Chingling and Rocky Helmet means that we can KO other Chinglings really well, which means our deck list actually can kind of stand up to like Altaria and Chingling really well. And the main upside to playing this deck in particular, I think right now, is that you have a really good matchup spread into Altaria Greninja. And we haven't talked about Altaria and Greninja yet, but that is kind of like the strongest deck in the entire game, and it's honestly super toxic. But because we're playing our own Chingling, and we're playing Rocky Helmets and Darkrai, we can basically win the Chingling battle, and therefore kind of win the Greninja battle, which should allow us to kind of win the game into Greninja Altaria. That's the concept here. This deck list here is playing double Rare Candy, Inflatable Boat, Rocky Helmet. The boat is to get Froakie out of the active spot without attaching an energy, which is really cool. And then Arven is a really underrated card. I think we're going to see a little bit more Arven as time goes on. It's kind of tough. You need the space in the deck to play it. This deck is playing double Research, double Copycat, double Pokeball, and an Arven. So you could play like an additional Cyrus instead of it, but that's a really nice consistency card that I really like. It's going to allow you to maybe grab rare candies out of your deck, which is honestly super underrated. Just a really, really, really good deck into some really prominent matchups at the top of the metagame. So that's why I think this deck's becoming a little bit more relevant right now. Absol is definitely not a bad card. The one of Absol, one of Darkrai. This deck can be inconsistent in its own right? You can lead Absol, you can lead Darkrai, all things you don't really want to do. But we're playing double Chingling, double Froakie, so those should be our leadoffs most of the time with Inflatable Boat. Honestly, it's a pretty consistent setup. And like I said, guys, really good into Altaria, Greninja, doing well into Suicune, Baxcalibur, and that to me is enough to really justify this deck list. Because honestly, this weekend, if I had to guess, it might be kind of dominated by Altaria, specifically Altaria and Greninja, just because that is the strongest deck. And whenever you go into a tournament, like sure, being consistent is really cool, like counterplaying is really cool, but at the end of the day, people are going to choose to play the deck that has the highest upside, because if they get lucky during the tournament, if they just happen to be somebody that draws well throughout that first day, then you're kind of guaranteed to win the matchup, right? And that's what Greninja Altaria does. So this is very much sort of a counter meta, anti-meta deck currently right now against some of the strongest decks in the game. But I really think it's worth kind of dusting this off and replaying it, just because again, it just has a really nice, like, kind of niche position in the metagame right now. Unless things change pretty drastically going into next week, I think this is going to be a really solid choice this season. I kind of forgot about it. I'm not going to lie. This deck did not see any play last season with Hydreigons running around. But right now, a lot of Greninja Altaria, a lot of Suicune decks with Rare Candy. This is just a really, really strong, awesome deck list. So I would recommend it. I really would. Nothing else to really say about it. Again, this is not a new deck list. The inclusion of Arven and Inflatable Boat is a little bit different, but you could change these cards out if you really wanted to play Double Cyrus or Sabrina Cyrus, or if you just, I don't know, wanted to play an extra Rocky Helmet. There's a lot of other things you could play in the deck, but honestly, I think Arven's a little bit underrated. So shout out to this deck list because I love it. I do love it. I used to call this high roll control because it really is like a very control type deck with Absol, with Chingling, with Greninja. The issue with this deck list always in the past is it had consistency problems. Specifically with its leadoff option, you really do want Mega Absol in the deck, and you want Darkrai, because they seem like they're just there for no reason. This deck, by the way, would play Dark Energy, so you're never able to attack with Greninja, which means all damage from this deck comes from Chingling, Darkrai Pings, and then Mega Absol. So that's why these cards are very relevant. At the end of the day, it's just really good if it gets what it wants, you know. But sometimes you lead Darkrai EX and it feels quite bad. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I would recommend it because you're going to do well into some relevant matchups. Next up, though, is Suicune Baxcalibur. I'm going to take a drink real quick. Drinking a Starry. Who would have thought? All right. Yeah, Suicune Baxcalibur. This is one that I have a lot of thoughts on as of late. Definitely an extremely relevant deck in the metagame, but honestly, this deck list has proven to be kind of fraudulent from a metagame competitive like viability perspective. And the reason I say that is because this is a deck list that absolutely mops anything in the game that isn't like the top 5 decks. Like, it's really funny. At first I thought, well, this is just sort of the strongest deck, and then the decks that are seeing play, you know, are seeing play because they're strong into the strongest deck, right? We talked about that on our tier list on Tuesday, but, you know, when you kind of look at the other decks that are seeing play this season, whether it's Bellibolt, Magnezone Oricorio, Greninja Altaria, those are all just, in general, like the other best decks in the game against most other things. And Suicune Baxcalibur actually loses to all of those deck lists. So we haven't seen Suicune Baxcalibur performing very well in recent online tournaments, and that's just because there's a lot of lightning type Bellibolt, Magnezone Oricorio decks. There's a ton of Altarias running around, lots of Chingling as well. This is not a deck that loves the Chingling matchup, I will say, especially if they lead with like Chiempao or Frigibax, because quite frankly, like if they can't, you know, play Pokeballs and they can't play Rare Candy, then the deck is super slow and it just can't really set up and get going. This is a deck that actually does really rely on the early Rare Candy Baxcalibur because of the flexibility that the extra damage provides. So Chingling is actually very effective into this deck. Also, you know, Protective Poncho can slow this down. It forces them to play Guzma on that turn or have it that turn, which is always really relevant. But like I said, guys, this is a deck that has been losing to a number of different decks at the top of the metagame. Its win rate has plummeted in online tournaments recently. That doesn't mean it's a bad deck list. It doesn't at all. This is still an incredibly strong deck. It just doesn't have a really great matchup spread right now. So as long as you're not playing like the top other 3 decks in the game, this Suicune Baxcalibur deck has an incredible win rate. It's just super strong, beats almost everything in the entire game, just because in general it's so strong, but loses to a couple of really key matchups that, again, are the other most played decks this season. I would not be surprised that going into this 1,500 player tournament or $1,500 tournament, if Suicune Baxcalibur was not the most played deck. Like, that would not surprise me at all. Things like Bellibolt and Altaria Greninja have kind of become a bit more viable than Suicune Baxcalibur. So this is just sort of a fair warning. I am talking about it in today's video. I don't want to tell you not to play this deck list. I'm just telling you it's becoming a little bit more suspect as time goes on. which I don't think is a bad development. I really don't. If the pendulum swings enough, that allows Hydreigon to come back. That is also maybe going to allow Suicune and Greninja to come back to some degree. So I don't know what's going to happen. I think the results this weekend will greatly define people's expectations about this deck list. And we just don't know what those results are yet. We're going to cover them on Monday, and we're going to stream the tournament this weekend. But there's a lot weighing on the results of this weekend, and I think that it's going to be very interesting to see. But again, if 20-30% of the tournament is playing this deck list, then it's very likely to do well, right? And I think a lot of people see a deck win tournaments and they think that's a good deck list, but they don't check the data, they don't check the average win rates, and they don't see that a deck might have a 40% win rate, but also get first place. They just don't really check that stuff. So that's the stuff that I'm looking at. That's how I'm determining viability throughout decks. And at the end of the day, I can only give you my opinion. So we'll see what happens with Suicune Baxcalibur. I'm very curious. It is a very fun deck to play. It feels more ethical than Suicune and Greninja, but it's certainly very strong. So there you go. Next up is, here it is, guys. This is, man, I can't believe we're still talking about this deck list. It's Greninja Altaria. By far, I think just the strongest deck that we've ever had in Pokemon Pocket. I don't think people understand what I mean when I say that. This deck list has the potential, I'm not saying it happens often, but it has the potential to go turn 2 Mega Altaria double Greninja for 170 damage, plus Cyrus to target whatever you want. Plus Training Arena is 180 damage. This deck list, theoretically, and I say that, I mean that, theoretically it can go turn 2 180 damage. Yeah, it's absolutely insane. I know that's not very likely to happen, but with copycats and stuff, it can happen. So trust me, I've done it before. And even if you don't get it on turn 2, it just becomes so likely that you're going to get the full board state set up by turn 3 or turn 4. So it really does snowball out of control. Again, not the most consistent deck in the entire game, but really high level players are able to utilize Swablu to kind of flip the coin and potentially just sort of cheese out a free turn sometimes by knowing when and when not to evolve the Swablu to maybe get that coin flip off. So an absolutely ridiculous deck. We're still playing Chingling Altaria. This deck list here, as an example, is playing 2 Froakie, 1 Frogadier, and then 1 Rare Candy. So 1 Middle Evolution, 1 Rare Candy. And I actually think this is correct because there's a lot of other Chingling decks seeing play. We have the other Altaria deck seeing play. We also have Dark Greninja seeing play that plays Chingling. So you don't want to lose the Chingling battle. This is a deck that will oftentimes lose the Chingling versus Chingling battle because we're not playing Rocky Helmets. We're not playing Darkrai for the extra damage ping. So if you go up against another Chingling deck that has any of those things, you're probably going to lose the Chingling battle, which means that you're going to get stuck not being able to play your rare candies. So the Middle Evolution is definitely, I think, very relevant. It does make this deck feel a little bit less consistent or less powerful in that turn 2, but a lot more consistent on that turn 3 range, which I think is kind of where this deck wants to fall anyway. So in a heavy counter Chingling metagame right now with Dark Greninja, with other Altaria decks, I would actually recommend playing the Middle Evolution. This is one of the few instances where I think that's relevant. Most deck lists here, you don't really need the Middle Evolution if you're, even if Chingling's popular in the metagame, because we can just sort of do other things. This deck list doesn't do that. You don't want to go into Mega Altaria until you have your board state set up, which is why I think the Middle Evolution and playing our own Chingling is kind of correct here. 1 Lycia and 1 Pokeball still because of the Swablu Chingling combination. Double Copycat, double Research. I would like to see something like a Mars in this deck or a Sabrina even, but I think Training Arena is very, very relevant because at the end of the day, 1 Greninja ping plus a full bench of Altaria is 150, but 160 is a relevant number with lots of Giant Cape Suicunes and stuff running around, so Training Arena brings you up to that point. Also, if you get double Greninjas, it's just a lot of damage, so the more damage, the better. But there's definitely going to be a lot of scenarios where maybe you kind of wished you didn't have Training Arena and you wished you had a Mars with the Chinglings. I think that's also kind of an underrated thing about Chingling that we don't see so much these days, but we saw really early on when Chingling came into the game was Hand Disruption alongside Chingling, right? People are just sort of playing more combo damage focused decks, but at the end of the day, Chingling with Mars and with Red Card and with Copycat is fundamentally broken, and I think people have kind of forgotten about that a little bit. But again, there's limited deck space. People are teching for Oricorio. They're playing Greninja Cyrus, so it's kind of hard to fit all those cards. But back in the day, we used to play Chingling Altaria with Red Card, Copycats, Mars. It was effectively absolutely ridiculous. So Hand Disruption, something that just doesn't see a lot of play, but it's really something that I believe in heavily right now. If you're not playing Hand Disruption, I think you're probably just at a bit of a disadvantage, quite frankly, especially since Cyrus is still the primary win condition. So stopping that from happening is becoming more and more relevant. But yeah, this is the strongest deck in the game, guys, and it has a really good matchup into Hydreigon and into Suicune and Baxcalibur, which is just really relevant. This is a deck that kind of beats most things, loses to Oricorio. which is very relevant. Also kind of struggles with that Dark Greninja deck like we talked about. So some stuff is rising up in the metagame to kind of counter this. But honestly, guys, like if you're not, as long as you don't hit Oricorio, you're kind of feeling pretty good. Playing this deck, you always have a really good chance to win, which is just kind of ridiculous. You know, it's one of those things. Like I really don't love this deck, but it's really strong, so we had to recommend it. If this deck sweeps the tournament this weekend, nobody should be surprised, honestly. Like unless Oricorio is prevalent, but we don't know. We'll wait and see. Next up is going to be Bellibolt. This is like Turbo Bellibolt, but this is like a new rendition also playing Oricorio. So even the people that are playing a more Bellibolt focused deck list, meaning Bellibolt and Zeraora, they actually have been playing Oricorio as well, just because they know how useful it is into that Altaria matchup. And that is sort of the big talking point about the season right now, about the current metagame, is that Altaria Greninja deck and being able to get over that hump. Bellibolt, Turbo Bellibolt without it is honestly, it just struggles. We don't have Chingling to stop the Greninjas, and we can kind of just get rolled unless we can kind of really get going on turn 2 for like 140. Like we just don't really have enough pacing to win the game. This deck list also is not even playing E-Generator, so we're kind of playing more of a consistency like mid-game Bellibolt build here. It's not even like a Turbo Bellibolt or even a what is it, like a high roll Bellibolt. Like this is just sort of an Oricorio Pichu build, which I do like. It kind of makes the prize math a little bit scary, but this sets up the deck to have Bellibolt be more like a single Pokemon card sweeper, with Rocky Helmet, Training Arena to boost the damage. We even have Giovanni on here, which is crazy. X speed to get Oricorio and Zeraora out of the active spot if we need to. Sabrina, Cyrus. I really like this deck. And again, the lightning type decks, at least this season, have definitely been formulated around Oricorio because of how strong it is, particularly into Altaria decks. And I know some people maybe don't love that, but at the end of the day, guys, like you gotta play Oricorio. It really is just a really useful card right now, because most decks in the game just can't really deal with it. And that's the reality of Oricorio. It's just really good, which I think is good for the metagame, but it's just something you have to know, right? So if you're planning to compete this season, even if you're planning to play in ranked, like keep in mind, like if there's less Hydreigon, then Oricorio becomes a much more relevant factor. And it's not something that we've really had to deal with for a while because Hydreigon has been so relevant. People haven't even thought about Oricorio. You got to start thinking about it right now because it's winning tournaments, it's winning games, and it's something that you got to consider. But I think Bellibolt's really strong. I really do. The tough part about Bellibolt is like always the prize math, because it's a 2-prize Pokemon. Yes, it has a lot of HP, does a lot of damage, but it's a 2-prize Pokemon. So when you pair it with Oricorio, with Pichu, with Zeraora, that gives your opponent the ability to just KO only one Bellibolt and still win the game, which is kind of the fundamental issue with Bellibolt, right? That's like the hard part about playing it, is that you also don't really, like, you want your opponent to go through double Bellibolt, but when you're playing all these other Pokemon, it makes that a lot more difficult. So that's sort of the issue with playing Pichu and Oricorio and stuff. I think Zeraora is just sort of needed because it pairs so well into Bellibolt in the high voltage cannon attack. But yeah, at the end of the day, guys, Bellibolt's still really strong, whether it's a 1/1 in Magnezone or Oricorio, or if you wanted to build the deck solely around Bellibolt. This is a deck list that actually got first place at about a 200, 300 player tournament just yesterday, which is really relevant. So again, Oricorio really good, Bellibolt really good. This is still a deck list I would greatly recommend. The Oricorio is going to go a long way into the Altaria matchups, and into Suicune. Bellibolt just does well anyway. So this is a deck that probably does not want to run into something like a Hydreigon, but into most other things in the metagame, I would actually feel really strongly about this particular list. So I really like it. Again, it did get first place recently, so definitely something worth considering. I think Oricorio is kind of just worth it. I'm not going to lie. I know it sounds like you're like, all right, yeah, I'll just throw an Oricorio into the deck, but like, why not? You know, at the end of the day, it's just a really good card. All right, so that's all of the top decks, but we do have a weekly wild card this week. So this is a really interesting progression that we've seen over the last few days. Let's take a look at it, guys. The weekly wild card. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is going to be Alolan Ninetales. That's right, Alolan Ninetales has been actually seeing a ton of play. This is effectively kind of a copy-paste of Suicune and Baxcalibur, but they're playing Ninetales instead, which may seem like it's kind of like a meme, but honestly, Alolan Ninetales is a really effective card. Instead of like drawing extra cards and dealing a little bit of damage like Suicune does, Alolan Ninetales slows the game down. It kind of stops your opponent from being able to play, and it maybe gets like a free KO, so then it sets up for the Chien-Pao later in the game. So even though we're not drawing as many cards as we do with Suicune, we can still play double research, double copycat, which is a ton of draw. Honestly, we've seen it in basically every deck in the game. It's enough to really draw through your deck pretty often. And instead of Suicune, we're playing the Ninetales. So Alolan Vulpix can kind of set itself up similarly to how Tadpole does it, which kind of means that we are not really reliant on the turn 2 Baxcalibur, which is pretty cool. So if you go second, Alolan Vulpix is a really, really good lead. We are playing Inflatable Boat. We have Team Star Grunt, which is a very underrated card. It's going to discard energies from Oricorio, from Suicune, from Greninja. I don't know. There's a ton of cards that have abilities, so Team Star Grunt's going to be really nice. Yeah, I mean, honestly, guys, I know it seems weird. A lot of people have been playing Ninetales in tournaments recently, and it's actually been doing quite well. It has a very respective win rate. I don't know if this is the way that we're supposed to play it, but this is just the way that people are playing it. The Baxcalibur Chien-Pao stuff, that whole package is quite frankly pretty strong. So if you wanted to play, water type deck, if you wanted to play Baxcalibur Chien-Pao, but you didn't want to ride the Suicune train, here's a really, really great example of the deck that I think is still very, very good. Training Arena also buffs Alolan Ninetales damage, which is funny. So yeah, I know it's strange. This is not something I ever saw coming. I do think this is more of like a flash in the pan type thing. This is definitely more of like a flavor of the week, in my opinion. But if you wanted to play the flavor of the week, and if you wanted to have a chance playing something that wasn't really, a top of a meta deck list, this is kind of what's going around, the circles right now in competitive play, which is pretty cool. And I like Alolan Ninetales a lot. It's really not a bad card. So it's nice to kind of see it, fit into, a more relevant strategy these days. So there you go. Alolan Ninetales. Is that what you thought the weekly wild card would be this week? I don't know. If this was last week, we probably would have done the Lopunny Annihilate deck, but that really also ended up being sort of like a one-time thing. And maybe it's the same with Alolan Ninetales. We'll have to see. Test it out yourself. Let me know down in the comment section below. But don't forget to subscribe, guys. We'll talk to you guys throughout this weekend. We're also going to cover the results of this major tournament on Monday. Even though this is a PGL tournament, it's not a Pocket Mads community tournament. We're still going to be streaming it, and we got to cover the results here on Monday. So it's going to be a really big deal. Link to register down in the description below. That's the video, guys. These are the top decks in the game right now, in my opinion. Comment down below if you agree or disagree. There's a couple of decks that are still very good that we didn't talk about. Things like maybe Blaziken, maybe Charizard. The Fire-type decks haven't been getting very much love, but they are still pretty decent. The Houndstone deck is actually quite decent as well, so we didn't put that on the list today, but you could definitely play that deck. It's not bad at all. It's a very, very solid deck list. Might garner an A-tier placement going into next week. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, guys, that's the video. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.